program. And next door is Dr. James Nikal, MP Seme. Welcome to the program as well. We're also expecting Joe Mutambu, a former Member of Parliament, Mwingi Central, and Honorable Alice Wahome, Member of Parliament, Kandara Constituency. They will be joining us shortly. And of course, thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in for this broadcast. We value your feedback. Talk to us. 22422 is our SMS line. Use the hashtag PowerBreakfast. And on social media, of course, at Citizen TV Kenya, on Twitter and on Facebook. And let's quickly take a look at the headlines as I also pose our question of the day this morning. Daily Nation, big headline, referring to the foreign envoys. You are driving Kenya into a ditch, warned diplomats. And of course, this is in regards to a press briefing that foreign diplomats held yesterday. 20 envoys demand restraint, and there we go, that headline on your screen. From politicians of a repeat election stalemate, saying they risk tearing the country apart. And there's a quote there by U.S. Ambassador Robert Godek. Anyone concerned with the technical preparations of IEBC, which he thinks might affect the credibility of the election, should go to court, as that is the legal avenue. The big story in regards to that headline is on page 6. I'll just touch on the headline there, or rather the first two paragraphs. Envoys from 20 influential countries yesterday condemned violence against election officials and cautioned leaders that they are playing dangerous political games that could destroy the country. In an uncharacteristically blunt statement, the 20 envoys said Kenyans, and particularly Kenya's politicians, should be careful not to destroy things built over years of hard work and sacrifice. It is easier to tear down than to build up, but it is dangerous and it must stop. And of course, in the next paragraph, it reads, while noting that the election should be held on Thursday as planned, they also pointed out that it should be conducted in an environment conducive to a credible, competitive, and participatory process. And that's the question we're asking you today. What is your take on the statement by the 20 envoys yesterday? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? 22422 is our SMS line, and you can talk to us on social media as well. Let me get reactions from my guests here in studio, because I'm sure they had a chance to either watch the press briefing or catch the story during the later bulletins. Professor Oduola, I'll start with you. My question to you being your thoughts on the position that they have taken and their weight in this process so far. What is your take?
Thank you very much. I would like to agree with the assertion that if anyone who feels that there is likelihood of not having credible elections and who is in a position to do something about it, they should go to court. I start by agreeing that when you think particularly of the chair, Mr. Chebukati, and the kind of statements that he made, it would be useful to go to court. But I also would say that there is still time, especially in a political context, for those who are in decision making to have some form of dialogue and agree in which way we are going. So I really do believe that there's room.
They are insisting that the election should go on. The National Super Alliance is saying the election should not happen because it's not an election that meets a certain threshold that NASA believes the Supreme Court called for. They called for that repeat poll. Do you see a disconnect between, because I think they made this statement after meeting the National Super Alliance, so they've taken some sort of stand from where many look at. What do you think shaped their decision making?
I think in a way we need to remember that diplomats, when they talk to you, you've got to read between the lines, because they're not really going to come and be in your business, so to speak. So what I see them indicating is that...
What are you reading between the lines?
What I'm reading between the lines is that the very reason why we had to get to the repeat was that there were clearly, from the perspective of the Supreme Court, illegalities and irregularities. And therefore, I read that it is important that as we look at whether or not those illegalities and irregularities have been addressed, we've got to determine to what extent the way that we are handling it, if we were to insist that we hold elections on the 26th, is going to impact Kenyans. Because it is really indicating that if you say we must go on, and you're aware that there are those who, as you indicate, NASA, is clear that nothing really has changed, then you're not really going to help, and they're not going to come on board.
Honorable Nikal, I want to read this statement again by U.S. Ambassador Robert Godek. He says, anyone concerned with the technical preparations of IEBC, which he thinks might affect the credibility, should go to court. Which means that from where they stand, they believe, if we are to read between the lines, that IEBC has done what needed to be done to prepare for this repeat poll. Do you agree with them?
I think they're being timid, and like most people that are trying to address this problem, they're not coming out to state the problem. The problem has been simple right from the beginning. NASA had NASA declared that and was aware that the elections were not done properly by IBC, went to court, the court agreed with them, and the court said that the processes at IBC were not correct. And from that point on, the important thing was, are the processes being dealt with properly? Now, when the ambassadors are coming and saying, anybody who thinks, the first thing we would have liked to hear is, do they think they must have met with the IBC?
Yes, they have.
Do they think that the processes are now up to date, that all the issues, the irregularities and so on have been corrected? Now, if they come out and say clearly that that is so, then they're giving direction. But if they say anyone who thinks, then even them, it is not clear what their position is. I tend to work with facts of the matter, because I know that a simple issue of fact that is not addressed will never be resolved by any means other than resolving the technical fact at the beginning.
Were you surprised when you heard their statement yesterday? Did it catch you off guard, or did you feel like they've stuck to some sort of script?
No, they left me with the feeling that they haven't satisfied what I thought they were going to do. Let me say they left me hanging, because I thought they were going to be more specific. They have been in this process right from the beginning. They knew what the problem was. NASA stuck to the same problem, to the same issue, that the issues at IBC have not been properly dealt with. The commissioners themselves, one walked away saying that, the chairman himself said that. So I was expecting that when the commissioners are going to go there, they are going to be more factual and say, from our view, this and this have not been resolved, and therefore in our view you are going into this election and it may not work, or we realize and we agree that this and this and this have been solved, so therefore go with. But to say that anybody who thinks, now that left the country exactly where they are, and my view was it was kind of a public relations issue that the diplomats are concerned. We are all concerned about what is happening in Kenya. The people we expect to come in now with a force like that of the diplomats is to give clear directions, address the root cause of the problem.
Okay, some would say that they are giving clear direction with what they said, but I'll come back to you to get more on that. Let me now introduce my other guest in studio, Honorable Joe Mutambu, former Member of Parliament, Mwingi Central. Welcome to the program as well.
Thank you.
Even as you walked in, we're discussing the headline in the Daily Nation. You're driving Kenya into ditch, warn diplomats. And the headline reads, 20 envoys demand restraint from politicians over repeat election stalemate, saying they risk tearing the country apart. I'm curious to get your thoughts, Honorable Mutambu, on their position and their weight in the process or in the place that Kenya finds itself in at this time.
If you cannot take advice from your brother, where can you get advice from? If somebody sits somewhere and goes against the spirit of the Constitution, the spirit of the law which governs the country, against it in totality, and you pronounce that there will be no election, this is after you have gone to Supreme Court, acquired the so desired verdict, election is nullified, password to our laws, you go out and celebrate, yes, we have won. You have been given specific terms that go out there and conduct election. You have not, or you go and negate the same spirit, and you choose to demonstrate in the streets. Yet you have been given what we have asked for. What else are you doing if you are not driving your country to the ditch? That's the question I would ask myself. Number two, if there are issues which need to be sorted out, there are mechanisms and laid down procedure to do so.
Do you think there are issues?
I'm saying if they are.
Okay.
But for now, the question is, what are we dealing with? We are dealing with a court order. We are dealing with a court order. It is not just a normal election. This is an election which has been ordered by court. This is not what we sit down and say, you know, we need to amend this law, we need to amend that law, we need to suit here, we need this person there, we need that person there. We need to deal with what is in our hands now. And what is in our hands, and with a lot of respect to my good doctor, who is a very good friend of mine, the person I respect so much.
I'm glad you made that clear. Go ahead.
Yes. that we have been directed. And if there is another direction to take, we should go back to the same position or to the same place where we got this direction from. So if there is any issue to have either this commissioner or that officer out, if we could go to court and get a nullification of presidential election, what is so difficult to go back to the same court and get an officer or a commissioner who is supposed to be kicked out of the commission through laid down procedure, and to follow those procedures either through the court or follow the laid down procedures? If we say we are going to remove you by force, then we are negating the same spirit of the Constitution we so proudly acquired.
Okay, let me allow Honorable Duol to respond. You've had his opening statement.
I would like to welcome the Honorable Member and appreciate that the challenge that we have in Kenya, and which I think is going to give us a lot of problems, is how we politicize, even to the extent of provoking those who could come on board. When the honorable colleague talks about the Supreme Court, I actually look at him and wonder whether he realizes that the very problem we are in is that the Supreme Court direction has not been followed. If you think about the manner in which the elections took place on August 8th, I think it might be worse as we go to October 26th. I say this because
there have been no improvements.
Not only have we not had no improvements, we have had a terrible opportunity to witness legislators like myself and Honorable Dr. Nyikal look at a country that is challenged by a process that was clearly seen to have illegalities and irregularities, and choose at that moment to come up with amendments to the law, thereby sending a message that we are actually not going to be willing to try and think of the best interest of the country at this time, but we are going to figure out ways in which the very independence, and I want to refer to the Constitution,
even
Article
though those amendments
81,
have not been signed into law.
even though they haven't, the problem is, as I indicated, that the legislators would sit and even consider doing that. And that's what I would like to get all Kenyans to
Your issue is with the thought.
The action.
The way
it's
you
not
say,
even, it's
okay, the thought
the
that became an action?
Yes.
Okay.
That became an action, and that signaled, in a way, that there was a way in which we were not really going to be honoring the law in the first place. Because if we look at our Constitution, Article 81, which is where, in my view, the Supreme Court ruling came in, free and fair elections are marked, among other things, that they will be free from violence, intimidation, improper influence or corruption, and that they will be conducted by an independent body. This is where I come in. There were irregularities and illegalities. The critical issue would have been for the IEBC to then look and say, what are the irregularities and illegalities? What NASA did was pull out of the Supreme Court what they thought would at least be the minimum. In my view, it is very unfortunate that Jubilee, instead of themselves, if they wanted to look at what could be illegalities or irregularities.
Which they say they
saying there were none. No. They kept saying there were none, and they had no
amendments. They say they actually say they are helping NASA.
No, if you allow me, that's what I'm going to say. In my view, is the greatest tragedy.
Okay.
Because I think we must respect that there is politics and there is leadership. And I think what I would want for all of us, and I hope Kenyans will look at Jubilee and look at NASA, and that they begin to see the politics and they see the leadership. Leadership gives direction. This is why even the diplomats, in attempting to give directions, are not really taking a stand, because diplomats are just that. But in my view, I would like to take issue with what my honorable colleague says,
briefly,
because I think that it would not really stand to test that going to the streets to demonstrate after you realize that the very reasons why the elections were nullified have not been addressed at all, which in itself is in line with Article 37, is really abuse of the law.
Okay, let me allow Honorable Dr. Nyikal also to weigh in. Go ahead, Dr.
Again, I take it normally very simply. The court order. The court order was that IBC to go and conduct elections and conduct them properly. The court even indicated that if you don't do that, then you may still have problems. Now, what has happened? There are two elements there. Conduct the elections, conduct them properly. Properly means that issues that were raised that became a problem that the court noted had to be addressed. The technical issues, the issues of personnel, and so on. Now, what NASA has been saying, and NASA went out and looked at what are the issues in their view that should be addressed, the bare minimum that should be addressed. Now, those have not been addressed. So, in a way, the court order is not being implemented fully. It is
that
just,
is how you see it.
It is just go and conduct elections.
Okay.
And what about the issues around the elections? Now, I want to say again, and I said earlier, the commission itself, one of the commissioners came out and said the way things are now, the way the commission is conducted itself, the way the commissions are making decisions, is itself not likely to deliver a credible election. The chairman of the commission himself came and stated that. In that environment, how are you expecting that you go into that election knowing that the issues that were raised at IBC have not been corrected? My friend, and Yeshua is my friend, we relate very well, we related very well in the 11th Parliament.
The camera.
Now, says that the only thing you do, the court order was given, the court order is being implemented, and that is enough. What is important is how the issues that were raised, the operations at IEBC.
All right, thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Honorable Alice Wahome, Member of Parliament, Kandara constituency, to this broadcast. Karibu Mheshimiwa.
Thank you, Wahiga.
As you settle down, let me allow Honorable Mutambu. I know you wanted to jump in even as your good friend as you've jumped in speaking. Go ahead now.
Yes. The reason why I wanted to jump in is that Dr. Nyikal and Professor, they are giving us a lot of stories about what has not been done, what needs to be done. They are casting aspersions to the election which has not been conducted. Number two, Dr. Nyikal is a member of Parliament. And if there is any law which needs to be amended to make it better, is in the best position to do so. Number three, the court did not say that and before you conduct these elections, go and take care of the bare minimum issues which are being or which court is alluding to. They did not raise the issues of bare minimum in a court, and that is where I'm coming from. That we are addressing an issue at hand here. We are not addressing any other election. We are addressing an issue of an election which has been ordered by court, and we have to play by the law. We do not have a problem with anybody suggesting that because of this and this and that, I will not participate. And so, if you wish not to participate, your views and your wishes are also well respected. That you do not want to participate, then stay away with it. You are saying, this is not my game, I am not going to play. But one hand you are saying, I am not going to participate. On the other hand, you are saying there should be nobody who is supposed to participate. Now, what are you doing to this country when you say, I don't want, yet you are saying you should not conduct this election? What they should be telling us is what they mean when they say there will be no election. Actually, that is what I would want to hear.
That's a question you'd like to pose.
I would want to hear from Daktari what he means when he says there will be no election. You know, when he says I will not participate, I will understand him.
Good.
But when he says there will be no election, I would want to know what what does it mean?
Thank you. I think your question is very clear, Honorable. You want to weigh in on this?
Actually, I wanted to weigh on that as I welcome my colleague, Honorable Alex. Yes.
Thank you, Professor.
I wanted to say that that indeed is the very issue, that in effect, what the Supreme
Court... I hope you're
Court...
answering his question.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
in effect, what the Supreme Court did was indicate that, as a matter of fact, August 8th, there was no election. Because what took place had irregularities and illegalities. And that was the premise upon which the Supreme Court would leave it to those that are responsible to make arrangements. When NASA says no election, it's because NASA is saying we are actually going back with the very same premise. So I think in brief that's what I would say. No election because nothing has been changed in terms of the process, in terms of the personnel, in terms of the people in charge.
So it's not that they will intentionally work to sabotage the election, which has been the fear of Jubilee.
Yeah, and they kept indicating, I think we've had NASA say that we are not boycotting elections. What we were calling for, if you recall earlier, no reform, no election.
Okay. Honorable Home, I can allow you now to make your opening statement.
Thank you very much again for inviting me here. I think from what I have listened, I think the question we are addressing is, one, whether there will be elections on 26th. And because as far as we are concerned, elections have been scheduled by IEBC. And in accordance with our constitution, IEBC is the only body mandated to conduct elections. Pursuant to the court order, of course, the previous elections were nullified. And when they were nullified, there was nowhere the court prescribed the validity or invalidity of the next elections. Because you cannot seek to address illegalities unforeseen in the next elections. And I think that that's where NASA is losing the point. For the court to have ordered repeat is because, according to majority judges, they were convinced there were some matters that were not well done. But that means the next elections can still be subject to a court determination. It is not in the place of NASA to tell us now the next elections automatically from their own view will not be properly conducted. And if they feel so, then they should participate and then place before the court the next evidence or other material to tell the court, look, we lost because this was not even addressed previously and this was repeated in this coming elections. But to preempt the conduct of IEBC is also an illegality. But we have no problem. I think it is not in place of Jubilee to say you must go to elections. But they cannot say others will not go to elections, as my friend Joe Mutambo has said. And it is very clear. They are not saying there will be no elections because they think things have not been fixed. It's because they plan to sabotage.
That is how you see it.
Yeah, they plan to sabotage. Calling for demonstrations today is actually sabotage of elections. It's overthrowing, and I have said so, overthrowing the constitution. And you know, that is an illegality because from tonight, not to tonight, from last night,
6 or 7 hours
ago,
yes,
there are no campaigns. Nobody is allowed to address voters by way of wanting to influence them. Here we are addressing technicalities, legal issues, but we are not supposed to be saying, oh, vote for Jubilee, vote for NASA, don't vote for NASA. You know, no, you are not supposed to make statements that are likely to injure, that are likely to influence, that are likely to be seen as a campaign. So on what platform will NASA call for demonstrations today? Demonstrations ended yesterday. We went to court, they were allowed some space, and therefore I think from now on the law should take its course.
Let me allow the Honorable Dr. Nyakal to now respond to a very direct question.
What I'm seeing, the issue here is we are narrowing down issues to the extent that if anything happens and it fits the narrow definition, then okay, it has happened. Let's start with the issue of elections. If you look at elections as merely people going to the stations, the booths are there and putting in the papers and so on, if that logistical problem is managed and people can go in and do that, that really is not what election is in totality. Election is a process after which everybody who participated, or even before that, everybody who is going to participate feels that the environment, the arrangements, the legal structure, the administrative structure is such that I am satisfied, and most people should be satisfied, that will bring a process after which now we can have a peaceful environment, because I had a fair chance and I went there and I lost. Now that is what an election, that's why democracy and election are in place, so that when the process is ended, everybody says, well, you had your fair chance, well, I had my fair chance, and that has happened. If you start with the process where as you are doing it, people are in doubt, they are saying this thing will not work, and worse still, the people who are conducting it are coming out publicly and saying, we do not think we shall be able to deliver a credible election. If, take an exam, if there was an exam and the people who are conducting the exams are telling the students, we don't think we will be able to conduct proper examinations, the students lose hope in that examination. They don't even want to take part. That is exactly what is happening here. But we are not even, when we say...
Chebukati then still said it is possible to ratify the process in the coming days if political players were to keep off. How do you respond to that, Honorable Dr. Nyakal?
Well, what has he done? Or what has happened since then? Or what has he, at this point, is the most critical person in the country done, and to correct what will be corrected and reassure the whole public that those issues have now been corrected, including the interference by politicians, as he says. Now that needs to be done. He has that responsibility. Now let's come to the issue of there will be no elections.
Briefly.
Now again, you don't define it from saying there will be no boxes, there will be no ballot papers, and no papers will get into them. That can happen, but does that constitute an election in the broader definition I've given? So we are saying that what is going to happen if NASA and IBC, if DB and IBC insist that there is an election, then what is going to happen is just a kind of public relations that said we sat down, we prepared, people came and voted, and this is what we have got, regardless of the feeling of the other stakeholders, a large number of stakeholders. Now that's what we are not going to say we are going to go to the polling stations and break down
Honorable Mutambo, come in.
I think listening to Daktari, you get to understand why Chebukati was saying that we cannot order free and fair election. And the answer is very simple. Because we are having our officers being beaten up when they are being trained. Who is beating the officers? It is the supporters of NAS. When he says that the players or the politicians should keep off, who are these players who are disturbing IBC? Again, it is NASA. It's my opinion.
Okay,
it is NASA politicians and the supporters who are camping at IBC offices from Monday through Friday, demanding resignation or removal of some certain officers, of which, and I want my good friend to read the Constitution very well, which gives them the right to demonstrate. It is spelled out very clearly that you demonstrate and you hand over a memorandum to a public institution. If you demonstrate from Monday to Friday, how many memorandums or how many petitions are you submitting? Are you demonstrating just for the sake of demonstrating because you are given that right by the Constitution to do so, or you just want to spoil the party of the organizers of the election? This is a question one would want to ask themselves. And my position is, and my take on this, if NASA wanted to boycott or to stay away from this election, what they could have done is to do so peacefully and tell their supporters, you know what, you are our supporters, and if you support NASA, don't go for election, stay at home. We could listen and we could hear what they are saying, and it could have made a lot of sense. But to tell them, go and demonstrate on that particular day, they are saying, make sure no ballot papers have been taken into the polling station, because those people, they will not demonstrate in the street here. They will demonstrate in the areas where the election will be conducted, and that is a criminal offense, and my good doctor knows it very well. So I do not understand, I cannot even understand where is driving this point.
You see a ploy to block IBC officials from accessing polling stations. Is that what you're hinting at?
Exactly. Actually, they are on the record, and I will tell you from like yesterday in Mwingi. Let me tell you now in Mwingi, an elected member of parliament and a governor stands and says, and I can ask you to play the clips, there will be no election here, and there will be no material which will be taken to the polling station. What does that person say if they say that? And they are telling people who will be harmed with the stones and crude weapons like pangas and the rest. So what are they saying? These are people who belong to jail.
What we are telling our supporters, from what I've said, from what I've really heard from most of our members, is that we are not going to participate, and we are asking our members not to participate. That is what we are doing. Now, we have not come out, you have not heard any NASA principal say, go out and destroy things and so on.
There have been reports that governors in at least 4 counties have said that there will be no voting in their counties. What does that mean?
It means our members will not go there to vote, and we are asking our members not to vote. You cannot interpret what I'm going to say and then use your interpretation to build on
parliamentary.
You do not.
I'm giving you a chance to finish. Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is, when we say there'll be no elections, I've explained that. And when we call on our members, we are calling them to not participate in that election. In fact, to the extent that we are even asking those who are our members not to even go and officiate if called upon. We can't catch them and say don't go. If they go, that is their choice.
And their worry is that your no election call could lead to violence or confrontation. And what is NASA doing to counter that?
If you listen to the NASA principal over the weekend, I think in Kisumu.
Yes, in Bondo.
In Bondo
and even yesterday.
He said, please do not attack other people. Please do not stop those who want to vote. We are not going to take part. And the way we see it, there will be no election. And he said very clearly that what will take place cannot be defined as election.
You see, this is pure despondency. When Dr. talks about narrow explanation or definition, I think Kenyans are not that naive that they will misinterpret your very clear messages of there will be no elections. It is different from telling Kenyans who support you that we shall not vote. Why would the NASA principal not change the message and say, I'm calling on my supporters on 26th, not to vote because I don't believe these elections will be free and fair. You are saying there will be no elections. We have seen IBC, the officials, being physically attacked. This morning, Ruth Odinga and Senator Outa are actually in court, and we watched them broad daylight, and they said these people must leave the compound where they were training the officers, and we saw destruction of property. And you saw one of the men was extremely vicious with a knife. I think we have also seen in this town property being destroyed, but we have not seen equal vigor, equal strength in terms of condemning that violence. But we've seen condemnation of people who have been beaten up by police, which is okay.
In fact, that was going to be my question.
Which is okay.
From Jubilee, we haven't seen that condemnation to the police.
From Jubilee, we have said the police must conduct their business lawfully, because
and where there have been cases of brutality,
and we have condemned that, and they have been told to actually work within the premises of the law, within the law. There is no way we can also excuse the police from not doing the right thing. But you must also understand the environment upon which they are working. When NASA calls for demonstrations, you don't hear them saying, do not come armed. They don't tell their supporters not to come with arms. And in almost all demonstrations, we have seen ammunition. We have seen stones. We have seen objects of fight. And they have actually used stones even on the police officers. The Constitution is clear. If you demonstrate, because it's your right to demonstrate, it must be peaceably carried out. And there is no way you can go armed. Daktari will not tell us that, okay, I saw him making an attempt in Kisumu about 2 weeks ago. But here clearly, these people are trying to establish a government through other means other than the lawfully established constitutional provisions of our document.
Fair enough. Allow me to interrupt because we need to take a break. She hasn't spoken. Okay. Honorable President will come in now.
This is so neat.
Yeah, hang on.
Thank you. I really just want to say that Martin Luther King indicated that if you don't stand for anything, if there isn't something that you're willing to die for, you really do not even deserve to be alive. And I want to remind particularly the Jubilee colleagues, my honorable colleagues, that what NASA stands for is reform, is change that is true for each and every Kenyan. And there is no reform whatsoever anywhere. If you're thinking of anybody who feels they are oppressed, who feels that elections that took place did not work in the way that it was supposed to, who feels that an independent body like IEBC does not seem to be independent, does not seem to be competent, I think it would be very, very unfair. In that context, for us as leaders, because one of the things that we must understand is that justice is not in a box. Justice depends on the perspective. And where I stand, I do not apologize for the call, there will be no elections. Because I truly believe that whatever will happen on the October 26th, if it happens, will be what happened on August 8th. And I do not, as a leader, think I would sit, look at my children, my grandchildren, my colleagues, and say, you know, we felt we had to go for elections because we just had to go for elections. I actually would like to say that what I would want to share is that what the NASA presidential candidate is saying, if you check the trajectory, and this is why I would like us to read, it was no reforms, no elections. Basically saying we cannot go on the repeat of August 8th. But when it looked, after all the effort, including the demonstrations, that all the constitutionally available options were exhausted, then the submission was there will be no elections. And I would like to reiterate once again that what this means is that if there is an election, it will really just be a repeat of August 8th. And I want to apologize and sincerely regret that there have been cases where NASA supporters and where there have been attempts to even attack or harm IEBC officials. I do not support that. I think that is not right. But I think sitting around this table, we owe it to ourselves. The envoys will not do it because they didn't. On August 8th, they kept saying everything was okay. But we owe it to ourselves to say, how do we as leaders come in so that we don't allow room for those kind of things to happen?
Okay, on that note, we need to take a quick break. But before that, let me read some of our SMS feedback you're writing in. Someone here, you don't give us your name, but you say, I wonder whether these diplomats, especially Godek, would be in support of this election if it were back in their home. Somebody else here says, I am Wanjiko. It is my godly, constitutional and democratic right to cast my vote to separate the two principles. I will vote on the 26th of October. Let Wanjiko express her constitutional right. The sovereignty of Kenya is with me. God bless Kenya. So, of course, different views from those who are watching on how Kenya should move forward. We take a quick break. We carry on with our newspaper review on the other side of this break. You're watching Citizen TV. Stay with us.